Adapted from archaic translation by H. T. Francis and R. A. Neal. Jataka number 370. Palasa Jataka. The goose said to the Judas tree, etc. This was a story told by the master, while residing at Jetavana monastery, concerning the rebuke of sin. The incident that led to the story will be set on in the Panna birth. But on this occasion the master addressing the brethren said, "Brothers, sin should be regarded with suspicion. Though it be as small as a banyan shoot, it may prove fatal." Sages of old too suspected whatever was open to suspicion. And with this he told a story of the past. Once upon a time in the reign of Brahmadatta, king of Benares, the bodhisattva came to life as a golden gosling. And when he came to be a full-grown goose, he lived in a golden cave, in the Sitakutta mountain in the Himalaya region, and used to go constantly and eat the wild paddy that grew on a natural lake. On the way by which he went to and fro was a big Judas tree. Both in going and returning, he would always stop and rest there. So a friendship sprang up between him and the divinity that lived in that tree. In due course of time a certain bird, after eating the ripe fruit of a banyan, came and perched on the Judas tree, and dropped its excrement into the fork of it. From there sprang up a young banyan, which grew to the height of 4 inches and was bright with red shoots and greenery. The royal goose, on seeing this, addressed the guardian deity of the tree and said, "My good friend, every tree on which a banyan shoot springs up is destroyed by its growth. Do not allow this to grow, or it will destroy your place of dwelling. Go back at once, and root it up and throw it away." One should suspect that which justifies suspicion. And thus conversing with the tree fairy, the goose uttered the first stanza. The goose said to the Judas tree, "A banyan shoot is threatening you. What you do in your bosom rear will tear you limb from limb, I fear." On hearing this the tree god, not regarding his words, repeated the second stanza. Well, let it grow, and should I be a refuge to the banyan tree, and tend it with a parent's love, it will to me a blessing prove. Then the goose uttered the third stanza. It is a cursed shoot, I fear. You do within your bosom rear. I say goodbye and off I flee. This growth, alas, dislikes me. With these words the royal goose spread out his wings and made straight for Mount Sitakutta. From then on he came not back any more. In due course of time the banyan shoot grew up. This tree also had its guardian deity. And in its growth, it broke down the Judas tree, and with a branch the dwelling of the tree god also fell. At this moment, thinking on the words of the royal goose, the tree god thought, "The king of the geese foresaw this danger in the future and warned me of it, but I did not listen unto his words." And thus mourning, he uttered the fourth stanza. A spectre grim like Meru's height has brought me to a fearful plight. Contempting the words friend Goosey said, "I now am overwhelmed with dread." Thus did the banyan, as it grew up, break down all the Judas tree and reduce it to a mere stump, and the living place of the tree god wholly disappeared. Wise men abhor the parasitic thing that chokes the form to which it loves to cling. The wise, suspecting danger from the weed, destroy the root before it comes to seed. This was the fifth stanza, inspired by perfect wisdom. The master here, his lesson ended, revealed the truths and identified the birth At the conclusion of the truths 500 brethren attained sainthood. At that time I myself was the golden goose. Source. Adapted from archaic translation by H. T. Francis and R. A. Neal. Jataka number 371. Dhyata Jataka. You are within my power, etc. This story the master, while living at Jetavana monastery, told concerning some quarrelsome folk from Kosambi. When they came to Jetavana monastery, the master addressed them at the time of their reconciliation and said, "Brethren, you are my lawful sons in the faith, begotten by the words of my mouth. Children should not trample under foot the advice given them by their father, but you follow not my advice." Sages of old. When the men who had killed their parents and seized upon their kingdom fell into their hands in the forest, did not put him to death, though they were confirmed rebels, but they said, "We will not trample on the advice given us by our parents." And on this he told a story of the past. In this birth, both the incident that led up to the story and the story itself will be fully set on in the Sanghavadaka birth. Now Prince Dayavu, having found the king of Benares lying on his side in the forest, seized him by his top knot and said, "Now will I cut into 14 pieces the marauder who killed my father and mother." And at the very moment when he was brandishing his sword, he recalled the advice given him by his parents, and he thought, "Though I should sacrifice my own life, I will not trample under foot their advice. I will content myself with frightening him." And he uttered the first stanza. You are within my power, O king. As prone you lie here. What plan have you to bring deliverance from your fear? Then the king uttered the second stanza. Within your power, my friend, I lie, all helpless on the ground, nor know I any means by which deliverance may be found. Then the bodhisattva repeated the remaining verses. Good deeds and words alone, not wealth, O king, in hour of death can any comfort bring. This man abused me, that struck me a blow. A third overcame and robbed me long ago. All sichas harbor feelings of this kind. To mitigate their anger are never inclined. He did abuse and buffet me of past. He overcame me and oppressed me to pain. They who such thoughts refuse to entertain, appease their anger and live at one again. Not hate, but love alone makes hate to cease. This is the everlasting law of peace. After these words the bodhisattva said, "I will not do you a wrong, sire. But do you kill me?" And he placed his sword in the king's hand. The king too said, "Neither will I wrong you." And he sware an oath, and went with him to the city, and presented him to his counselors and said, "This, sirs, is Prince Dayavu, the son of the king of Kosala. He has spared my life. I may not do him any harm." And so saying he gave him his daughter in marriage, and established him in the kingdom that had belonged to his father. From then on the two kings reigned happily and harmoniously together. The master here ended his lesson and identified the birth. The father and mother of those days are now members of the royal household, and Prince Dayavu was myself. Source. Adapted from archaic translation by H. T. Francis and R. A. Neal. Jataka number 372. Bhikkubodhi. To sorrow for the dead, etc. This story the master, while living at Jetavana monastery, told about a certain elder monk. It is said that he admitted a youth to holy order of disciples, and that this novice, after ministering to him zealously, in due course of time fell sick and died. The old man, overcome with grief at the youth's death, went about loudly mourning. The brethren, failing to console him, raised a discussion in the Hall of Truth, saying, "A certain old man on the death of his novice goes about mourning. By living on the thought of death, he will surely become a castaway." When the master came, he inquired of the brethren what was the subject they had met to discuss, and on hearing what it was he said, "Not now only, but formerly also, the old man went about mourning, when this youth died." And with this he told a story of the past. Once upon a time in the reign of Brahmadatta, king of Bewares, the bodhisattva was born in the form of sakka. At that time a man, who lived in the kingdom of Kasi, came into the Himalaya region, and adopting the life of an ascetic lived on wild fruits. One day he found in the forest a young deer that had lost its mother. He took it home to his hermitage, and fed and cherished it. The young deer grew up a handsome and attractive beast, and the ascetic took care of it and treated it as his own child. One day the young deer died of indigestion from overeating of grass. The ascetic went about mourning and said, "My child is dead." Then Sakka, king of heaven, exploring the world, saw that ascetic, and thinking to alarm him, he came and took his stand in the air and uttered the first stanza. To sorrow for the dead did ill become. The lone ascetic, free from ties of home. The ascetic no sooner heard this than he uttered the second stanza. Should man with beast wife, O Sakka, grief for a lost playmate finds in tears relief. Then Sakka repeated two stanzas. Such as to weep are glad may still mourn the dead. Weep not, O sage, it is vain to weep, the wise have said. If by our tears we might prevail against the grave, thus would we all unite our dearest ones to save. While Sakka was thus speaking, the ascetic, recognizing that it was useless to weep, and singing the praises of Sakka, repeated three stanzas. As ghee-fed flame that blazes out fast, is quenched with water, so he quenched my pain. With sorrow's shaft my heart was wounded hurt. He healed my wound and did my life restore. The barb extracted, full of joy and peace. At Sakka's words I from my sorrow cease. After thus advising the ascetic, Sakka departed to his own place of dwelling. The master here ended his lesson and identified the birth. At that time the old man was the ascetic, the novice was the deer, and I myself was Sakka.